Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Eastchester Union Free School District podcast, and this is the first visual recorded podcast we have in this district, and I am pleased to welcome the superintendent of our schools, Dr. Ronald Valenti. Welcome.
Thank you. Pleased to be here, Joe.
And it's very prophetic because, we talked about this last year, and this was kind of the vision, and it's very, very special to see this.
Well, I commend you for your stick-to-itiveness and tenacity of purpose. Yeah.
Well, thank you. Thank you so much. Dr. Valenti, what would you like to discuss first? I guess the community also wants to know how this year has progressed and what we have to look forward to.
Right. Well, we're 18 months into my superintendency, maybe a few months more, but I think Eastchester is a wonderful community. I think it's an honor to be the superintendent here in Eastchester. Definitely a very strong parental community dedicated to education, and that's just the recipe you need for excellence and for advancing the needle in terms of educational improvement. I find very strong parental support. In fact, even our grandparents are very much involved. I was at an Ann Hutch breakfast for seniors. The cafeteria was jammed, okay? So a lot of family roots here, a lot of commitment to our children, a wonderful community in terms of its divergence, which allows us to bring together so many groups in the learning community. So Eastchester has much to be proud of. Challenges, yes, there are. And I guess I could cite them very quickly by citing the strategic priorities that we've set up over the past year and a half and where we'd like to go as we look toward the future. Strengthening school security. If we're looking at a scorecard, we now have SROs, school resource officers, who are really Eastchester police officers at each of our 4 campuses. The one we're on right now, our secondary campus, high school, middle school, and we have one each at Waverly, Ann Hutch, and Greenvale. We've expanded the hours of our security guards. Originally, they were leaving at 3 p.m. At the elementary school, just when things were getting exciting in terms of extracurricular activities, town programs, etc. So we've expanded those hours to 6 p.m. to increase security at the elementaries. And at the middle high, they were leaving at 6 p.m. Just before all the activities, after school, athletics, sports, that we do conduct here, plays, musicals, etc. So we expanded that to 10 p.m. So I'd say strategic priority 1 is pretty much 100% completed. We can check that box. I think our students, staff, faculty are safe, have never been safer. Of course, you're never safe enough, let's be blunt, but we're doing everything we possibly can in order to make that happen. And we've found the money in the budget, over $1.5 million as a package in order to make this happen. But unless you have security and safety, you really have nothing. Okay? So that was step number 1. Our second priority, to improve academic outcomes. We've made progress. I think there's a road to travel. Just take our grades 3 through 8 testing, ELA and math. In math, a year ago, 67% proficiency. Proficiency means a student is basically at grade level, all right? Everybody should be at grade level after grade 3. We were 67% on average. We set a goal of 80, and this past spring we hit 82%, right? Now we want to see this coming set of tests that are coming up in April, May, will we be able to do better than 80%? The goal we're setting is 85. Now you may say, why 80% or 85? What is the relevance? Well, there are a couple of benchmarks that we need to look at. I believe in data, and I believe data tells a story. Right? You could have a good feeling about a district, but I want to know, what evidence do you have? If you're at 80 or 85% in terms of your proficiency, you're amongst the top 10 school districts in Westchester. That's where Eastchester ought to be. Okay? We're moving there gradually in math. In ELA, we're still traveling that road. We have work to do, but we hope to achieve the 80% goal there. So from an academic outcome point of view, that is one benchmark we should look at and definitely make a goal, in addition to what I mentioned, that every student should be able to read at grade level by the end of grade 3. That should be a non-negotiable. Strategic priority 3 really extends the academic discussion, but it brings it more to a secondary level. And what should the high school graduate look like? Not just in terms of credits, that's important. What is the readiness for college? How are we preparing our students for college? Are they ready for the rigors of college? And are they prepared to write, speak, and generally communicate in an effective manner so they can function as citizens in a global society? That is our career and college readiness goal. And strategic priority 3, I think we're moving the ball there. We did a tri-states evaluation. They gave us some good input in terms of what we're currently doing. And we are doing some very good things. But what we'd like to do is expand our courses in advanced placement to more students. We'd like more rigorous courses. We'd like to take a look at our grading policy. Are we assessing in a 21st century way? And quite frankly, make sure that we're teaching in a 21st century way. Here we are in a world of electronics, so we're addressing 21st century. What is it in methodology and teaching today that's different from 10 years ago, 20 years ago, or 100 years ago? Strategic priority 4 is critical. We have a bond referendum that the voters generously approved, $75 million. We're basically coming into the third summer on that work. Infrastructure, security again, many other areas that would upgrade systems that had deteriorated here in the schools. The question before us is, originally that was $125 million. It was narrowed to 75, and rightly so. Prior boards and superintendents felt that 75 was the right number. My question, the board's question, is what is the $50 million that fell off the table? What did that look like? Was that frivolous? Or are there substantial areas there that we should address? The next big question we'd like to ask and answer this year, this bond, first bond, $75 million that I cited, was crafted back in 2018, passed around 2020 or so. We're living in 2024. Any of us who own a home know that between 2018 and 2024, that's 6 years, a lot of things can happen.
Yeah.
All right? Not only to your external structure and your infrastructure, but did you address everything you should have addressed in terms of classrooms, technology, 21st century instruction? I didn't see much of that in the current bond. So we're taking a hard look at every classroom where our children come every day, at the furniture, at the aesthetics, at the infrastructure elements, okay, be it technology, be it areas of heating, ventilating, HVAC, what we call HVAC. Every part of that, because our children, this is their second home. They live 7 or 8 hours a day here every day. I walked through the halls here at the high school at the end of the school day. I counted a few hundred students still here, practicing, extracurricular, athletics, etc. This is our second home, all right? Our children probably spend not as many hours, but close to as many hours here as they do at their home.
Absolutely. Yeah.
We want to be sure that our schools are up to the 21st century standards. The last priority that we have, and I think COVID perhaps really signaled to the entire nation, maybe the world, that our children's social emotional health and mental health has become a much more critical issue that we need to take an ever harder look at. So that fifth priority, we're beginning it now. We're looking at options to strengthen our internal support systems, pupil personnel services. We're looking at the potential of a mental health clinic in the future that might bring support to our students that's not currently available. We're looking at possibly a scheduling approach where we offer our students during the school day some opportunity for programs that assist with mental health, et cetera. We're looking seriously at a Yale University program used by some districts in our region called RULA, which is a curriculum framework from kindergarten through 12th grade. So to end the first question, at this point, it's a great community, a challenging community, a community that supports their children and education. There are many challenges. We're addressing them, and we're moving into the 21st century, full speed ahead.
Amazing. Well, that's incredible to hear as someone who has grown up in this community. This community's always been home for me, and as someone who's went through the school district as a student and now obviously an employee of the district.
Right.
It's so...
And that's a significant strength, quite frankly.
Yeah.
The loyalty to the community, the rootedness in the community, and now becoming role models within your own community.
Absolutely. I mean, at this point in my life, I'm a bit of an old soul, but I take a lot of pride and integrity in really paying forward what I know to, where I came up. And I have to thank you for, highlighting that importance of it, because it is how a community continues to thrive.
Yes.
It's such a big component of that. And also too, thank you for saying all these topics. I mean, that was awesome.
It's a lot to chew on.
Well, it was. It's a little bit to unpack, but really quickly, I do have like a couple of questions about each topic to unpack, and really for people who aren't aware, of what's going on. So, for example, too, I mean, my parents, my youngest brother just graduated from the district in 21, so they have no idea what's going on. Or they're not paying attention as much as they were when their kids were in the district. So. Maybe just a couple of questions. The first point about security, I mean, that sounds incredible. That's amazing. Congratulations. And I can also personally attest to what you said about the officers after school, having done the play and have had to rehearse from, late periods after academics. There was always someone in the building. I always feel safe here. Also, too, the technology of how to get into the building is completely 21st century, so it's succeeded. And I think that's, everything that you put in place is really working. Are there any questions that you get from people about security still, even with the additional officers and whatnot, that you want to address?
No questions, really. A lot of commendations. When we did meet with Senator Mayer, who happens to be the chair of the Education Committee, we did note that we have increased our security effort, therefore our security costs. And we're also looking for ways that state aid may better assist us in terms of this effort, that I think the legislature may see the challenge of stepping up to improve security within our schools, both physical and therefore strategic priority 5, mental support. I think those are two areas, we bookended them, 1 and 5, that maybe the legislature may want to take a harder look at and say our schools are doing ever more in terms of broadening the security scope, that lens, and broadening the mental health, social, emotional lens. What more should we be doing in terms of foundational aid, other forms of aid, offering grants, et cetera, to support it? And not just select schools. Look, I've worked in school districts that are very wealthy, somewhat wealthy, and not wealthy at all. And I understand the legislature must direct funds to schools that are not wealthy at all. But I do think certain areas, whether you are very wealthy or not, all students deserve a certain amount of funding. And mental health, social, emotional, and security, I think, are those areas.
And do you think there will be a day where we would see legislation that kind of covers school security,
Well,
each community?
I think you have to keep hammering away at it. I think you have to show that you really are doing it by spending the money, reaping the results, and then I think sooner or later it registers with the legislature and the governor that, look, we have an obligation to do more in terms of support.
Absolutely. No, that makes total
Yeah.
sense. But I see the difference, and
Right.
you know, everything is certainly, the results are paying off, in my opinion,
Sure.
with the security. I think the second point was reading, to get everyone at a reading level.
We were talking about academic outcomes.
Right.
And that is an ongoing process.
Yeah.
We are forever looking at improving academics. There is no perfect system. There never will be. But as I say to my graduate students and to my administrative team and the teachers, in education today, unless you're moving forward, you're moving backward. There is no luxury of staying still, standing still. All right? So if today you're not moving forward, then, ladies and gentlemen, you moved backwards. And that's not good. So in terms of academic results, how do we improve curriculum? How do we improve opportunities for students to select rigorous courses? How do we improve our grading policies? How do we improve the whole area of scheduling so we maximize opportunities for students? And that's an area that is never static. It's dynamic, it's ongoing, and we need to know what is happening out there that best gets, number one, effective results, and number two, is adaptable within our particular community. There might be certain models that are not relevant to Eastchester, fine. But then what models are, and what is going to help move the stick in terms of getting that kind of result?
Of course.
Move the needle.
Oh, absolutely. And I like what you said. If you're not going forwards, you're going
You're
back.
going backward.
Yeah.
That's right.
That's very profound. And well, let me ask you a question based on academics. And this isn't a question just for this community. This is the state of the world
Right.
today. You know, and I see it with students today. You know, everyone's at war with screen time and the phone. And, you know, and I guess there's just so much in the world now that's so easy to access with technology. How are administrators, educators, kind of across the board, you know, what methods or tactics are being used to have kids maintain interest in books and in, you know, in their academics? Because that's something I feel that everyone is experiencing today.
The focus on reading is absolutely essential. And this is where I will take the opportunity to speak to the broader community, the moms and dads, the grandmas and grandpas, the extended family. Read, read, read to your children, and make it fun, all right? Our children either want you to read to them at the youngest ages, or perhaps they could read to us. But the point is, we have to make reading a practice, a cultural norm within each home. Children ought to see books lying around. They ought to see mom and dad reading. They ought to see the extended family reading. Bedtime is a wonderful time to use to read to children or have them read to us. I have 3 grandchildren, 6, 10, and 11. Whenever they have sleepovers, and even at home with their own parents, when they go to bed, there's always a book. Either they're reading it or they're being read to. Every night, every day, reading. It must become essential fabric to our lives. If that happens within the home environment and the community environment, and the libraries are being used effectively, and we're putting materials out there, then I think the love for books will be generated even more so, and we can encourage our students within the school environment to appreciate the necessity of reading, not just fiction, but nonfiction. We need, particularly within our schools, to broaden the scope of nonfiction so that when children are reading math and science and social studies, they're going beyond just a reading exercise and they're entering areas of content knowledge. So that's a critical challenge for the schools. But the essential point is that at the heart of learning is reading, okay? And you have those 4 fundamental skills, not just reading, the ability to listen, all right? God gave us 2 ears and 1 mouth.
Yeah,
Maybe
right.
we should listen
Yeah.
twice as much as we talk.
That's
All right?
the wisdom that everyone will get from this as well.
The
Is
reading, the listening, the speaking. If you can communicate a message in this day and age, you're going to be hired.
Yeah.
All right? Your ability to communicate is a fundamental trait for recruitment and for being selected. And ultimately, your capacity to write. You know, can you put a subject and a verb together, an occasional adjective, and once in a while an adverb, and really begin to build not only sentences, but paragraphs and essays. We're working on that in many ways. We've introduced the writing revolution, TWR, which is really the Hockman method. Judy Hockman was the principal of a school for students who really had learning disabilities, but it's a very prescriptive approach. It's very fundamental. It's very foundational. It's very much aligned to the science of reading. So if you put together the science of writing and the science of reading, you assume nothing. You assume children don't know anything. So phonics assumes you don't know how to pronounce a word. We can't assume you know from just seeing it, all right? So phonics gets to phonemic awareness, breaking a word apart, et cetera, and learning reading in that way, and then building vocabulary. Writing, likewise, you must begin at the roots and build from a simple sentence into a larger piece of work called a paragraph, and then move into the essay and beyond. So all of these are foundational techniques we're introducing, focusing on, and looking to see the results not only immediately, but we think there'll be greater long-term results.
And just the question about the phonetic awareness, when you're breaking down the word, is it just for the purposes of trying to audibly understand the word with its sound, or are you also breaking down the etymology of the word?
Both.
Both, okay.
Both. So, emerge, okay, that is a phonetic, right?
Right.
Emerge, right? But also, means going out, right?
Right.
So you're moving out.
Yeah.
Eject.
Right.
Elicit.
Yeah.
The E is relevant, not just from a phonetic point of view, but actually its roots are in Latin and Greek in terms of moving away from.
Right.
So elicit, I'm getting something from someone. I'm eliciting.
Right. No, that makes perfect sense, and that's very effective then if they can understand the roots of its Latin
and
origin.
that's where vocabulary begins to build out of that, as you could see.
You know, it's funny that you mentioned how important reading is, because I know people my age now, and I'll ask them, when was the last time you picked up a book, and they can't remember, and they're grown adults. So, you know, I think everybody can apply what you're saying.
Right.
You know, not just the students, but
So take math. John has 12 more apples than Mary. John went to the supermarket and bought an additional 10 apples. Mary has 4 apples.
right.
How many apples does John have? That's not just math, algebraic to some degree. That's reading.
Right.
That's understanding. Additional. If I don't know what additional means, I'm not going to solve that correctly.
Right.
All right. So no longer is the student just ready to see 6 plus 9 plus 4 equals. It's now in a word problem. How do I interpret that word problem? How do I parse it? How do I understand how the words relate?
Right.
So literacy is at the heart of math. It's at the heart of science. It's at the heart of all that we learn, okay? So that literacy by grade 3, every student should be proficient.
This implementation, just really quickly, because I do want to move on to advanced placement. This implementation, did it start last year? Has it really been taking form this year?
Well, this is my second full year, so I can only speak to last year. But when I came on board, I insisted right from the get-go that we bring in Hegarty's phonemic awareness at Waverly, which really is fundamentally getting into the roots of words, phonics, etc. And our incoming students, to what degree were they aware of dissecting a word, breaking it into its smallest syllables, and then being able to put it together, pronounce it correctly, then understand it, etc. So the whole science of reading is built on phonemic awareness, phonics, and then building that up in terms of the vocabulary of it all, the critical reading, the understanding, the fluency of it all. So those are all pieces that come together to make for the masterful reader.
Right.
We began that at Waverly. We extended it, obviously, into Ann Hutch and Greenvale right away. We're now focusing this year not only on the fundamentals of reading. We use foundations. We use reading as fundamental programs of that nature. We have gone beyond that now into bringing into every classroom differential reading texts, libraries, so that if I'm in a fourth grade classroom, there might be a book for a student that's reading at a lower level, a median level, a higher level, and maybe beyond in both fiction and nonfiction. That's important. So those are the kinds of libraries we need in every school. Our students do take a lot of online work that they have for reading. They do bring books home for reading. So there's a lot of focus now over the past 2 years in this area. We've introduced literacy coaches and math coach, STEM coach, and in next year's budget, I'd like to increase that so that we're really working with our teachers to ensure that, take any grade you want, every second grade teacher is on board with appropriate lesson plans, following the curriculum, doing the appropriate methodologies that are necessary for an effective classroom. We give a lot of time each day to language arts, be it 120 minutes at the earliest age, then to 105 minutes, and we can break those total block minutes into segments so that every teacher knows what they ought to be doing during that particular segment, ranging from phonetic emphasis, vocabulary, independent reading, small group work, paired work. All of these must happen so that students are constantly engaged and having fun while they're learning.
It sounds like all hands are on deck with this process, and it's been very thorough.
Comprehensive and systematic.
Moving on to advanced placement, my first question is what has been done in your time here so far, and then what is being continued to be done in order to not only create more advanced placement classes, but then in order to engage more kids in advanced placement.
No, I think the high school is doing a solid job on advanced placement. When I first came on board, we had a broad range of the courses that you ought to have. I think my only concern, and Tri-States, the evaluation of the high school did speak to this as well, we ought to be engaging more students in advanced placement courses. There are many schools now where every student, before you graduate, should have taken at least one AP course.
Right.
All right? And the focus is not necessarily getting a 5 or a 4 every time, but having the experience of a challenging course, a challenging curriculum. So all of our students, irrespective of regular or special ed across the spectrum, I think should complete at least one AP course. So that's one goal we have. We also want to take a hard look at non-Regents courses so that we're challenging students. I would think the minimum level should be completion of a Regents level course or its equivalent. But I think we have to avoid lowering any types of standards on courses just so I can get an easy grade, okay? Um, we have to change the culture so that we're taking courses necessary to make us as competitive as possible. The operating assumption ought to be it's a competitive world out there. Are you going to succeed or not in that competitive world? That's what we ought to be training our students for, okay? If I meet a lot of lazy people along the way, then I'm going to be at the top of the pack, right?
Right.
So, fine, let all the Eastchester graduates be at the top of the pack, all right? I'm not going to argue that thesis. But the point is, assume that everybody out there is extremely competitive. Now, how competitive are you?
To your point, I agree. You don't want to, you don't want to perceive everyone as an opponent in life, but
not an opponent at all.
But to your point, you want to assume
But
that
if two people are applying for the job, are you the better or not? Right. That's the bottom line.
Absolutely. 100%. I completely agree with you, and I think that's very important to not lower the standards for the AP classes, because I feel that a lot of people, that would be an easy fix, but that you're not doing the students any favors.
No. And one of my favorite examples, talking about testing, I happen to be somebody, maybe old school, call it what you will, who believes that testing has a place, a legitimate place. Let me give you an example. You're at an airport. There are two airplanes, both leaving at the same time, both going to the destination you'd like to go to. An announcement comes over. Plane number one has a pilot who has passed his pilot exam. Plane number two has a pilot who is an intern, struggling, but will be taking his test shortly. Which plane would you go, one or two?
Probably number one.
I would think so. I would think so. So when people, suggest to me that, well, testing's not important, there are other ways of knowing what you know. Well, there are many ways of knowing what you know or don't know.
Right.
But the bottom line is, I would want to go to a surgeon who, quite frankly, passed the test, got the certification, has all the credentials that are necessary, fly the plane with the person, right?
Right.
Hire the architect who passed the test.
I completely agree.
Bring in the attorney who passed the bar.
Right.
I think the point is we want professionals and we want to make our students professionals. And let's not run away from testing. But if that's one of the criteria for getting there, then let's face it and do well in the testing.
I have read certain places, I think even colleges and universities have, devalued their perception of testing, which and some very prestigious places too, which has been very odd.
There's been an onslaught on the SAT, and I don't have shares in the SAT, ETS, or the ACT, so I'm not here arguing for them, but I'm here to say that a lot of research indicates that they do uncover, these tests, areas of deficiency that students ought to know about and work on, all right? Let's be honest, the research also indicates, and this is a national problem, this is not an Eastchester or a New York State issue, grade inflation. The average grade right now is somewhere around A-. So if I'm a dean at a college and I'm seeing A's, a few A-, and maybe an occasional B, my job is a little bit more difficult when I'm comparing a lot of students from different colleges. What does A mean anymore?
Right.
And now we have A+, and, soon there'll be A++. So people are leaving pleased with their grades, but what do they know?
Yeah.
What is their skill set? Now, does the SAT or the ACT necessarily uncover all of that? No. I think there are other instruments too, but it uncovers more than necessarily a GPA from a high school.
Right.
And that's a national challenge right now.
Yeah. And I don't want to digress too much, but why has that happened? Because from what you just said, from the data of testing, it is a great measuring stick of what to find in a student or what the student knows.
Because there's a general societal difficulty with having anyone fail.
I see.
and we have to think about that. Nobody wants to be a failure. You don't want to speak to anyone as a failure. But we have to have the strength of purpose to say, look, you're good, but there's a pathway for you to become better.
Right.
You're not there yet.
Yeah.
All right? And it's that conversation, courageous conversation as it may be, that we need to do with our students, our children, etc. And the inability to do that, or the failure to do that, tends to say that everybody is successful, okay, irrespective of. And while we'd like to think that's the truth, and it's a utopian ideal, I think we are not being as forthright, honest as we can and should be, particularly with our children. We need to challenge them. I mean, how many coaches out there are challenging our players? All right, you know, you didn't swing that bat the right way.
Right,
okay?
right.
You went down into the ground. There should be more level, right?
Yeah.
So we're always correcting our students from a coaching point of view, from an improvement in athletics point of view, and we need to do more of it from a point of view of academics. I mean, our teachers do a good deal of it, don't get me wrong, but in terms of a national issue, why are we shrinking away from testing? We have a lot of reasons we use. They're biased. They discriminate against certain groups, etc. I'm not insensitive to any of that. But the bottom line is that you cannot eliminate all testing all the time and simply say that we're going to make evaluations based on some very loose assumptions about human nature.
Yeah.
We have to avoid being aspirational only, and we have to get very specific in terms of setting specific goals and specific expectations.
And I'm not just saying this, you know, because I'm sitting here talking with you. I completely agree from firsthand experience where, you know, one failure can be your best teacher.
Exactly.
You know, and if as a society, to your point, if we're just, you know, passing kids along for the sake of we don't want kids to be upset, well, in the long run, I don't find that that's moral,
Right.
and you're not helping the student out.
No.
And the last thing I remember, there was someone who told me once, he said to me, sometimes rejection is your best form of protection.
Mm-hmm.
And I really believe that, seeing
Right.
a lot of life lived, and I commend you for holding that line in a world that's really abandoning it seems.
Holding it with myself, with my colleagues, my administrators, my teachers, students. You've got to do it yourself. You've got to hold yourself to that standard and then hold others.
Yeah. No, absolutely. Well, I definitely commend you for that, because it's what's needed, especially with the balance in a perceived way, how much it's shifting. My last question on APs is, and I don't know, and this is why I'm asking the question, because I don't know where this, you know, who really would take the reins in order to do this, but I'll use myself as an example. When I was a student here, I was the stereotypical creative, artistic kid who was daydreaming in class, and talking to you now, I'm not proud of it, but I did not take an AP when I was in high school because I was just so arts, you know, acting, writing, entertainment focused. So someone like me, what path would, like, administrators or teachers, you know, what's kind of the game plan to get me involved, or the student that kind of I was involved in an AP? Because I think that's an important question, especially for members of the community, where they might see their son or daughter and say, I don't know if, you know.
Well, I mean, knowing very little of what you did say right now, there are AP art courses, art history being one, and we'd like to open that up to all of our students. I'm not suggesting that's an easy course, but I think one of the AP courses, I mean, there is AP not only art history, but different forms of drawing, painting, etc., studio art. I don't want to go through the whole list. That could be one potential answer. Gee, Joseph, which of these do you think your strengths lie? And let's try that one AP course.
Right.
All right. So that's what I'm trying to bring about, that we not simply have the AP group 50% or 51%, and the non-AP group, that everybody at least enjoy one of those courses and what they would look like. That's part of the answer to your question. All right?
And that's a fantastic answer. Yeah, the diversification and expanding of advanced placement.
Right now, someone like yourself into the arts, journalism, etc., have you taken electives in journalism and writing? We're looking at broadcast journalism for next year, which focuses both not on writing but on speaking and communicating. So there are electives that could support someone like yourself, certain AP courses that could support your interest, and then you have your regular constants that everybody needs to succeed in.
Yeah.
You know, your English, math, science, social studies,
For sure.
et cetera.
For sure. And to what you just said, you know, and obviously as time goes on, right, we advance as a society, but I will say and I could be completely wrong on this, but I do believe that there were not as many APs when I was in high school compared to when there are now.
The number has grown.
Yeah.
And ETS has learned a lesson, like everybody else, that you must evolve to more AP opportunities. And there is now a whole program, and maybe we can get into this another time, called pre-AP. That is to say, how do you begin to build the skills that you need to be successful in AP? Maybe you could build an 8th, 9th grade curriculum around that. We're accelerating our middle schoolers right now in terms of Algebra R. We're looking next year to increase science in terms of earth science regions. So this all gets to the broad issue of more rigorous courses that are skill-oriented and that begin to move the needle in terms of success.
Awesome. Well, it's very good to hear, and once again, as someone of this community, I thank you for yes, as we have a piñata party, I believe, happening outside.
That's wonderful. As long as they don't hit you or me, we're good.
Yeah, we're safe. So the fourth point that you mentioned, the infrastructure. You know, again, I'm completely in the dark with this, but did you just want to comment about that? You know, improving the infrastructure, and you know, you did mention some numbers, that
Right.
125 million to the 50 million that was, you know.
Right, that fell off the table,
Right.
et cetera. I'm sitting here in a classroom that has 21st century furniture.
Right.
That is good, all right? It's adaptable furniture, movable furniture. It's able to be used as a study hall, a broadcast area, a workshop class, multiple uses. That is the classroom of the future. We have to get away from the rows of desks. We have to get more into movable furniture where students work together, pairs, small groups, 3 to 5, larger groups, where students work independently, be it online or reading independently. You need that kind of classroom environment. The libraries of old, where it was just stacks of books, now must become more digital oriented, right?
Right.
So that's another major improvement.
Mm-hmm.
Our auditoria should be, and cafeteria, more involved in what the technology is to
Absolutely.
be used. Every classroom should have maximum technology in terms of the most available, up-to-date smart boards, et cetera, movable in many ways where a teacher can use them as a blackboard for internet purposes. All of these have to come together in every classroom in Eastchester,
Yeah.
every auditorium, every cafeteria. That's what I mean by bringing us into a 21st century instructional institution.
And it's happening, because this study center was not here when I was there.
Correct.
The digital lab, the technology in the auditorium now, I wasn't there, so that's been happening.
Correct.
So, which is wonderful.
It allows for collaborative teams. It allows for independent work.
Right.
It allows for a big thing now post-COVID is people working independently from home a few days a week.
Yep.
All right, so the capacity to work independently, et cetera. So we need to be training individuals for all of these skill sets of the future.
So that additional 50 million, that's going to be in the next bond?
Oh, no, I don't want to say it's going to be in there.
Right.
We're examining what parts of it ought to be in there.
I see.
The timeline right now is that the board is doing its review with us, and by May, we should be able to say to the community, here are some things we found out. May not be the whole picture, but a general sense of where we think we ought to go. in the next year or so. But no dates have been set other than May, where we would be able to talk a little bit more about what our investigation has uncovered.
Gotcha.
Unmet needs.
Great. Really quickly, the social emotional learning, another very pivotal 21st century component. And I see a lot of it. I speak with teachers about SEL and I guess, for people, because you did mention it in the beginning, but why is it so important for this to be on the forefront within education today?
Well, if I'm not emotionally healthy, I'm not going to be academically healthy. Unless the heart is aligned to the mind, I'm not a holistic person, okay? And then the physical, obviously, is the third component. So where students are suffering from depression, where students are suffering from anxiety, where students are suffering from a lack of autonomy, self-confidence, etc., that is detrimental not just from a psychological or psycho-emotional point of view, that's detrimental academically. Mm-hmm. I'm not going to be an effective learner. I'm not going to be able to enter society fully engaged, to be competitive, and to live a full life. Okay, ultimately we want people to live a full life, an enjoyable life, a successful life. So social emotional is critical in that algorithm, and we can't assume it's there, and we must address it, and we must ensure that where it is not effective in any particular student, what are we doing to help with the family correct it?
Prior to COVID, was social emotional learning already happening? Was it already a thing?
To a degree, but not with the sense of urgency of today. COVID, if you say, it was a horrible thing, but it taught us a lot of very successful lessons. Mm-hmm. One of which is to take a real hard look at that mental health side, mm-hmm. even more than you may have been examining it. Yeah. And it also, to some degree, caused its own mental health issues. So it was a compounded issue.
Absolutely.
But that is now much more accentuated than it was years ago.
And to your point, so there was data and whatnot that showed where, everyone's truly, but where kids' mental health, was in bad shape mm-hmm. from COVID, and then the urgency came to really.
Yeah, I think it pinpointed certain areas of concern. Not that we weren't concerned before COVID, don't get me wrong, and we were doing a good deal. Guidance counselors and school counseling and pupil personnel services long preceded COVID. I'm simply saying COVID targeted certain areas, and I think gave society in general a good shot in the arm to say, now go forward and take a harder look at this. Social, emotional, mental health being one of those areas.
Absolutely. And then is there, how does one kind of evaluate data for that and see the improvements over time?
There are benchmarks that are out there. There are surveys that are out there that allow you to benchmark how a student feels about how much homework I get, mm-hmm. My school environment, do you feel acceptable? There are quantitative benchmarks that you could investigate, and through the help of Ruler, we're going to begin to look at that more carefully. How can we move that needle in terms of satisfaction levels, in terms of comfort levels, in terms of tolerance levels? A number of those are measurable in terms of the whole value spectrum. So we want to look at that, benchmark that data.
And then has it been improving since?
Well, this year, I can only speak to Eastchester. I've been in other districts where we've used other instruments. We used Panorama for some work I did in Westbury, and we saw some improvement in the second portion of the year. But right now we're using Ruler. We're training our teachers and staff who'll be involved, and we're going for full implementation next year.
Gotcha.
So we have not yet surveyed students at that level.
Okay. But it sounds like everything is in place for it, and the priority is very...
Right, and it doesn't happen in an instant. It's a multi-year plan.
Right. Well, those were the 5 points that you
Well,
wanted
I
to focus
thoroughly
on this
enjoyed
week.
it. I'm sure there'll be many more topics that we can talk about in the future as well.
Absolutely. Is there anything else you'd like to say before we leave this
Well,
episode?
thank you to you, and thank you to the community for listening. And I hope you get good reviews on the first
I hope so,
video
too.
podcast.
I do just
And
want to say,
They
Doctor,
say come back for more.
for how on top of things you are. It's truly inspiring to really just hear you talk and to just not only learn, but to see it happening in real time in the school. I think it's incredible that,
Well, thank you. I'm having fun. I'm enjoying doing what I'm doing. And unless you're having fun and enjoying it, don't do it.
Right.
So,
You got it. What is it? You have to make your vocation your vacation? Is that what?
well, I guess that could be
Yeah,
true.
someone said that. I think Mark Twain said that. I don't know who said that.
But in any event, I'm an academic practitioner. I enjoy my teaching. I enjoy practice in the classroom and schools. And I think unless you do both, graduate students can say, do you just read books or do you actually do this?
Right.
So I feel good about actually doing it, not just reading the book.
It definitely shows.
Yep.
It definitely shows.
Okay.
Dr.
We'll
Valenti.
do it again.
Yeah, thank you
Right,
so
all right,
much.
Joe.
Absolutely.
Real pleasure. Right.
Thank you, everyone. Tune in next time.
Thank you.